We didn't feel that there had been a thorough enough reading through all the way through Thoreau and Walden and read in midland English dialect, like Chicago speak. So we weren't aware of any neo-transcendentalistic movements, so we're going to continue in that case with reading Walden in Visitors. He interested me. Now, what's it? Oh, he's talking about his skillful chopper, his visitor. He interested me because he was so quiet and solitary, and so happy withal, a well of good humor and contentment which overflowed at his eyes. We were back talking about the same man from Canada. His mirth was without alloy. Sometimes I saw him at his work in the woods. This is a visitor to Henry David Thoreau in Walden, felling trees, and he would greet me with a laugh and an inexpressible satisfaction, and a salutation in Canadian French, though he spoke English as well. His Canadian wood-chopping visitor. When I approached him, he would suspend his work and, with half-suppressed mirth, lie along the trunk of a pine which he had felled, and peeling off the inner bark, roll it up into a ball and chew it while he laughed and talked. That's funny, they're eating pine bark. Interesting that can you live on bark?
On Seventh Avenue, on Roosevelt Avenue, there used to come
What?
a shop, a large Chinese shop. They were selling bags of different trees.
Bark?
Inside. Yeah, they have big bags of fabric bags filled with different types of bags. And I was amazed.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I was looking for that a few years ago, but I didn't find it. I remember that the years I was working, so that was like 20 years ago.
Well, I hear people survivalist like eating bark.
And I've never seen another shop like that with bags, selling bags.
How does it differ than having like maple syrup?
It could be very nutritious also.
Fine.
Well,
there's a lot of,
they sell medicine.
Dear, well, pine pollen is good for you, and pine nuts are good for you. And well, actually, sleeping in the pine forest, you get pine pollen. And you can eat pine nuts, and who knows what else. There's pine needle tea.
The guy who was having the shop, he was Chinese, he didn't speak a word English. I so much wanted to ask him what was so bad.
He spoke English as well. When I approached him, he would suspend his work and with half-suppressed mirth lie along the trunk of a pine which he had felled, and peeling off the inner bark, roll it up into a ball and chew it while he laughed and talked. Such an exuberance of animal spirits had he, that he sometimes tumbled down and rolled on the ground with laughter at anything which made him think and tickled him. That is so funny. So this pine bark was so healthy that he rolled in.
It was something that makes you happy.
Pine nuts are also aphrodisiacs. Looking around upon the trees, he would exclaim, "By George, I can enjoy myself well enough here chopping." We're reading the sounds part of Neo Walden. We're in our own private Walden. We hear the sound of the Neo train. Looking round upon the trees, he would exclaim, "By George, I can enjoy myself well enough here chopping. I want no better sport." He wants to chop trees. Well, there's a bit of pleasure in chopping trees, swinging an axe there.
Then maybe he was a builder in a previous life.
It could be a sport. I mean, I used to chop wood. I mean, we cut wood on the farm there, our heating method. And we had a coal-burning, wood-burning stove.
We all did. We did too.
And when my father burned wood, which we cut, and late at night, through the night, he would put the coal in for overnight. But during the day, you used wood, which the boys, you had a lot of boys as a farmer. You insisted that you had boys, and then the boys could go work on the farm, and then the boys could chop wood. But we did have chainsaws, but occasionally you used an axe to split a log and stuff. We did have axes. You could chop a small tree down with an axe. So I got the pleasure of swinging an axe. And you can swing and split, use log splitters with you have a large hammer. We call it kind of rusty because I'm not a real genuine farmer anymore. Some people say I never was a genuine farmer. Mm-hmm. And my brother complained all I did was play the piano, so I was a terrible farmer. Mm-hmm.
They also play music, didn't they?
Everyone took music. Our family had music was required. My mother's, remember all my mother's sisters? My mother's and all of them had to take piano. And then there was, remember Aunt Irene told a story about how they have like 4 sisters taking piano lessons. Like, how are you going to practice? So they actually waited online to practice, and one would be sitting, and she told a story about how one of them fell off the piano bench waiting for their turn. Or what was that story? What a crazy thing. You have one piano and 4 children taking piano lessons. 5 sisters taking piano lessons. And you think about how hard it is to find time to practice when you're like one player in the house. So how do you practice with 5 and 1 piano? And it's no wonder none of them are concert pianists now, because they had to fight for the piano. In the winter, by George, I can enjoy myself well, even left here chopping. I want no better sport. So he would prefer not to play tennis. He would just want to swing his axe. Sometimes, when at leisure, he amused himself all day in the woods with a pocket pistol, firing salutes to himself at regular intervals as he walked. It's interesting to observe unusual people with unusual characters. So like an easygoing, sort of like relaxed kind of person. We have a guy at the tennis court. He's like so casual, and he's like, he shows up. He doesn't bring a tennis racket. He's like a pro player. He's pretty good. He just walks in casually and looks around, and then he just borrows somebody's racket. So why does he come to the court with no racket? When he's like a pro player. And then he's so cavalier. He was cavalier in his regular intervals as he walked. In the winter he had a fire, by which at noon he warmed his coffee in a kettle, and as he sat on a log to eat his dinner, the chickadees would sometimes come round and alight on his arm and peck at the potato in his fingers, and he said that he liked to have the little fellers about him. He likes to eat with the birds. I guess you could eat with the birds and they could pick up the crumbs. Right? In him, the animal man chiefly was developed in physical endurance and contentment. He was cousin to the pine and the rock. I asked him once if he was not sometimes tired at night after working all day, and he answered with a sincere and serious look, Gora put, Gora pit, put, pit, Gora pit. I never was tired in my life. You see, there's this kind of person who is like high energy. They're like, you don't know where their power comes from. An ultra high energy person. I was never tired in my life. But the intellectual and what is called spiritual man in him was slumbering as in an infant. So on the other hand, he's energetic, but Thoreau's saying he's not awake spiritually. He had been instructed only in that innocent and ineffectual way in which the Catholic priests teach the aborigines, by which the pupil is never educated to the degree of consciousness, but only to the degree of trust and reverence, and a child is not made a man, but kept a child. When nature made him, she made him a strong body and contentment for his portion, and propped him on every side with reverence and reliance, that he might live out his threesome years and 10 a child. 60 years and 10 a child. 60 years. 30 is 36 plus 10 equals 46.
Right, 30 is 12, 10 and 10 and
10. What is 30?
30.
30 plus 10 is 40 years. Well, life expectancy may only be 40. He was so genuine and unsophisticated that no introduction would serve to introduce him, more than if you introduced a woodchuck to your neighbor.
Oh, God.
Dear, like, you have the plain, you have the undisturbed, you have different types of people, like a completely uneducated simpleton who's kind of like Zen-like. He's kind of like enlightened in his way, but he's unsophisticated. I don't know of examples like that, but you encounter those. They're sort of happy, brilliant people, but not from going to college. College is what ruins you. So he's not ruined by college. He had got to find him out as you did. He would not play any part. Men paid him wages for work, and so helped to feed and clothe them, but he never exchanged opinions with them. He was so simple and naturally humble. If he can be called humble who never aspires, that humility was no distinct quality in him, nor can he conceive of it. Wiser men were demigods to him. If you told him that such a thing was coming, he did as if he thought that anything so grand would expect nothing of himself, but take all the responsibility on itself, and let him be forgotten still. He never heard the sound of praise. If you praised him, he wouldn't hear it. He particularly reverenced reverenced the writer and the preacher. Their performances were miracles. When I told him that I wrote considerably, he thought for a long time that it was merely the handwriting which I meant, for he could write a remarkably good hand himself. I sometimes found the name of his native parish handsomely written in the snow by the highway with the proper French accent, and knew that he had passed. So, I asked him if he ever wished to write his thoughts. He said that he had read and written letters for those who could not, but he never tried to write thoughts. No, he could not. He could not tell what to put first. It would kill him. If you told him to write his journal, it would kill him. You'd say you have to take English class and write an essay. He would probably pass out. You have to do it. You can't do it.
To see the way he writes about him.
Do you know such a person?
No.
Are you such a person? No, you're too sophisticated.
Oh,
you have so much education.
Maybe I have some things in common with him.
No, dear, you're highly sophisticated, intellectual.
I usually don't understand compliments. When somebody compliments me, I don't say things because I don't listen to it.
Because you don't hear anything.
So in that case, I'm much like.
Well, when they compliment me, there's nobody. My inner self is empty, so there's no one to compliment there.
It seems like I'm polite, but the thing is that I don't do it because I'm polite. I do it because I don't understand it that way. I don't pay attention.
I asked him if he ever wished to write his thoughts. He said that he had read and written letters for those who could not, but he never tried to write thoughts. No, he could not. He could not tell what to put first. It would kill him. And then there was spelling to be attended to at the same time. Most people have writer's block because they don't. Most skills are learned by habit. So, like, you play the piano by the practicing habit. The habit. You compose music by creating the habit of composing. You could create the habit of writing. He doesn't have the habit of writing like Thoreau. When Thoreau developed his journals and started writing a journal,
the guy probably never went to school.
He developed a habit. He's got a habit of writing in journals. Writing habit. Well, he's not. He doesn't care for it.
It takes some time before you're able to write, to be competent to write.
So we can't make everyone into a Thoreau? I heard that a distinguished wise man and reformer asked him if he did not want the world to be changed, but he answered with a chuckle of surprise in his Canadian accent, not knowing that the question had ever been entertained before. Quote, no, I like it well enough. He doesn't believe in change.
He likes it to that. He was satisfied with his life.
He's satisfied.
I mean, who can blame him? Everybody, people are so unsatisfied with so many things they have. You're tired of them.
There's a type of physical worker. It could be a farmer. It could be
psychologically they're better, better off, they're happier.
You can be happier as a
hand activity makes you more happy. Than
it's like a carpenter. A carpenter or something is far happier than an investment banker. Like, I know I like it well enough. I would have suggested many things to be a philosopher, to have dealings with him. To a stranger, he appeared to know nothing of things in general, yet I sometimes saw in him a man whom I had not seen before, and I did not know whether he was as wise as Shakespeare or as simply ignorant as a child, whether to suspect him of a fine poetic consciousness or of stupidity.
Interesting the way he puts it together.
Well, I'm telling you.
He was experimenting. I think that was Thoreau's experiment.
Well, remember, ignorance in some people is bliss, and they by not knowing about anything, you're better off than being.
It's like that German.
He was fortunate he didn't go to Harvard. And wasn't taught anxiety studies or something. A townsman told me that when he met him sauntering through the village in his small, close-fitting cap and whistling to himself, it reminded him of a prince in disguise. His only books were an almanac and an arithmetic, in which last he was considerably expert. The former was a sort of encyclopedia to him, which he supposed to contain an abstract of human knowledge, as indeed it does to a considerable extent. I loved to sound him on the various reforms of the day, and he never failed to look at them in the more simple and practical light. He had never heard of such things before. Could he do without factories? I asked. He had worn the homemade Vermont gray, he said, and that was good. Could he dispense with tea and coffee? Now, this is where we come in. I had said that I could not. Did we ever give up coffee for a week? Did this country afford any beverage beside water? He had soaked hemlock leaves in water and drank it, and thought that was better than water in warm weather. When I asked him if he could do without money, he showed the convenience of money in such a way as to suggest and coincide with the most philosophical accounts of the origin of this institution, and the very derivation of the word pecunia. Interesting, that word, pecuniary, pecunia. What is the origin of it? I have to look it up. Do you know, in my Flipboard magazines, I started a word builder, a vocabulary listing. So when I look up a word, I post it to Flipboard. So now I have vocabulary words. So we get flipped out over this one. If an ox were his property, and he wished to get needles and threads at the store, he thought it would be inconvenient and impossible soon to go on mortgaging some portion of the creature each time that amount. He could defend many institutions better than any philosopher, because in describing them as they concerned him, he gave the true reason for their prevalence, and speculation had not suggested to him any other. At another time, hearing Plato's definition of a man, a biped without feathers, and that one exhibited a cock plucked and called it Plato's man, and that one exhibited a cock plucked and called it Plato's man, he thought it was an important difference, that the knees bend the wrong way. He would sometimes exclaim, "How I love to talk! By George, I can talk all day." I asked him once, when I had not seen him for many months, if he had got a new idea this summer. "Good Lord," said he, "a man that has to work as I do, if he does not forget the ideas he has had, he will do well. Maybe the man you hoe with is inclined to race. Then by gory, your mind must be there. You think of weeds. He would sometimes ask me first on such occasions if I had made any improvement. One winter day I asked him if he was always satisfied with himself, wishing to suggest a substitute within him for the priest without and some higher motive for living. Quote, satisfied, said he. Some men are satisfied with one thing and some with another. One man, perhaps, if he has got enough, will be satisfied to sit all day with his back to the fire and his belly to the table, by George. Are you satisfied with just a fire and food at the table? Don't you have any dissatisfaction with just plain food and fire? Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied?
Yes, I am.
That's only with Thoreau and books and the fire and food. Isn't there more than books? Coffee. Are you going to get coffee? There's more than food, there's coffee. So there's more than just food and fire. Some men are satisfied with one thing and some with another. One man, perhaps, if he has got enough, will be satisfied to sit all day with his back to the fire and his belly to the table, by George.
What did he say before?
What? Yet I... What did he say before about what?
Something he asked him before.
Just asked him if he was... So... If he had a higher motive for living.
No, he didn't ask that. When did you hear that?
He asked me if I had made any improvement.
Yeah, you see. He sees that he's not...
If he was always...
Isn't that quite interesting? But
he asked if he was always satisfied with himself. He said he is satisfied.
But the thing is that look at him now asking Thoreau if he made any improvement because it seems he wants him to improve. You know, he doesn't find him perfect, but he finds himself probably perfect.
Well, he feels he's trying to improve himself.
No, he's not.
Did Thoreau make any improvement?
He's satisfied. He doesn't need improvement, but he needs the Thoreau done.
Well, why are we satisfied with this reading and don't improve it in any way?
Go back a couple paragraphs and read again.
No, I'm asking you, why is this reading satisfactory?
Fine reading, I love it.
It's not satisfactory.
Right now it's like fun a little.
It's not satisfactory. Go back and read what?
I love that.
My lord, said he, a man that has to work as I do, if he does not forget the ideas he has had, he will do well. Maybe the man you owe with is inclined to race. Then, by glory, your mind must be there. You think of weeds. He will sometimes ask me first on such occasions if I had made any improvement. Have I made any improvement? All this reading. I wonder if I've improved it all.
Come on, don't interrupt.
One winter day I asked him if he was always satisfied with himself, wishing to suggest a substitute with him for the priest without and some higher motive for living. He was going to suggest that he take up ultra-advanced meditation. Satisfied, said he. Some men are satisfied with one thing and some with another. One man, perhaps, if he has got enough, will be satisfied to sit all day with his back to the fire and his belly to the table, by George. Yet I never, by any maneuvering, could get him to take the spiritual view of things. The highest that he appeared to conceive of was a simple expediency, such as you might expect an animal to appreciate. Thus practically is true of most men. If I suggested any improvement in his mode of life, he merely answered without expressing any regret that it was too late. Yet he thoroughly believed in honesty and the like virtues. It's sort of like the rustic or the natural, simple man. It's not describing the bulk of humanity in some ways.
Yeah, it's an interesting simple man.
Not everyone is suited for the transcendental life. There was a certain positive originality, however slight.
How do you know that he is not
transcendental already?
maybe he knows more, he has more than he knows.
In his previous life, he was totally enlightened.
That's why he's so simple.
Well, true. We don't know. Well, that if you have that kind of character, and you could be happy. I mean,
intellectuality doesn't necessarily help. It's even
no,
a hindrance.
it's a hindrance.
Spirituality.
True. If I said that you had to do this and that, I would probably get hit in the head by the Zen master. Say that it's his way. The Zen master would say he knows the practice and I don't. But I'm still like reading books and trying to get it. I've been reading Thoreau to figure out the way, and this guy, this woodchopper, is just chopping wood. Seems he knows the way then.
He's more Tao than Thoreau.
Well, I'm stuck in my thoughts, and he's just swinging his axe. So, well, you could see why he's fascinated with him then. This type of person is fascinated. Because in a way, when he says, I never was tired in my life, his kundalini is basically fully active and functioning. Yeah. Though he wouldn't know that he has a kundalini. There is a certain positive originality, however slight, to be detected in him, and I occasionally observed that he was thinking for himself and expressing his own opinion, a phenomenon so rare that I would any day walk 10 miles to observe it, and it amounted to the re-origination of many of the institutions of society. Though he hesitated and perhaps failed to express himself distinctly, he always had a presentable thought behind. Yet his thinking was so primitive and immersed in his animal life that, though more promising than a merely learned man's, it rarely ripened to anything which can be reported. He suggested that there might be men of genius in the lowest grades of life, however permanently humble and illiterate, who take their own view always, or do not pretend to see at all, who are as bottomless even as Walden Pond was thought to be, though they may be dark and muddy. This is Thoreau's analysis, so we just stick with him, I guess. Many a traveler came out of his way. That's the end of the, I guess, discussion of the woodchopper. I don't know what we call him. French Canadian. A skillful chopper. He came in on the previous reading. Canadian woodchopper and postmaker, who made his last supper on a woodchuck which his dog caught. Okay. He's the woodchuck man. With the dog. He had my father's dog. Many a traveler came out of his way to see me and the inside of my house, and as an excuse for calling, asked for a glass of water. I told him that I drank it at the pond and pointed thither, offering to lend them a dipper. Far off as I lived, I was not exempted from that annual visitation, which occurs, methinks, about the 1st of April, when everybody is on the move, and I had my share of good luck. Though there were some curious specimens among my visitors, half-witted men from the almshouse elsewhere came to see me, but I endeavored to make them exercise all the wit they had, and made their confessions to me in such cases, making wit the theme of our conversation, and so was compensated. Indeed, I found some of them to be wiser than the so-called overseers of the poor and selectmen of the town, and thought it was time that the tables were turned. With respect to wit, I learned that there was not much difference between the half and the whole. One day in particular, an inoffensive, simple-minded pauper, whom with others I had often seen used as fencing stuff, standing or sitting on a bushel in the fields to keep cattle and himself from straying, visited me, and expressed the wish to live as I did. He told me with the utmost simplicity and truth, quite superior, or rather inferior, to anything that is called humility, that he was deficient in intellect. Do you think if we had a beautiful, little wood cabin in the woods, and do you think a bunch of city slickers would come and say they would like to live like we are? A city slicker from Manhattan would come up, stop by, and say they would rather live the way we do in the woods. These were his words. The Lord had made him so, yet he supposed the Lord cared as much for him as for another. I have always been so, said he. From my childhood I never had much mind. I was not like other children. I am weak in the head. I was the Lord's will, I suppose. And there he was to prove the truth in his words. He was a metaphysical puzzle to me. I have rarely met a fellow man on such promising ground. It was so simple and sincere and so true, all that he said. And true enough in proportion as he appeared to humble himself as he exalted. I did not know at first, but it was the result of a wise policy. It seemed that from such a basis of truth and frankness as the poor, weak-headed pauper had laid, our intercourse might go forward to something better than the intercourse of sages. We're reading a section on visitors to Walden. I had some guests from those not reckoned commonly among the town's poor, but who are among the world's poor, at any rate, guests who appeal not to your hospitality, but to your hospitality, who earnestly wish to be helped and profess their appeal with the information that they are resolved, for one thing, never to help themselves. I require of a visitor that he be not actually starving, though he may have the very best appetite in the world, however he got it. Objects of charity are not guessed. Men who did not know when their visit had terminated, though I went about my business again, answering them from greater and greater remoteness. Men of almost every degree of wit called on me in the migrating season, some who had more wits than they knew what to do with, runaway slaves with plantation manners, who listened from time to time, like the fox in the fable, as if they heard the hounds baying on the track, and looked at me beseechingly, as much as to say, "Oh, Christian, will you send me back?" One real runaway slave among the rest, whom I helped to forward towards the North Star. Man of one idea, like a hen with one chicken, and that a duckling, men of 1,000 ideas and unkept heads, like those hens which are made to take charge of 100 chickens, all in pursuit of one bug. A score of them lost in every morning's dew, and become frizzled and mangy in consequence, men of ideas instead of legs, a sort of intellectual centipede that made you crawl all over. One man proposed a book in which visitors should write their names, as at the White Mountains, but alas. What? Sort of. Come frizzled and mangy and consequent, men of ideas instead of legs, a sort of intellectual centipede that make you crawl all over. Yeah, let's see what that says here. Frizzled and mangy, men of ideas instead of legs. One man proposed a book in which the visitors would write their names, as at the White Mountains, but alas, I have too good a memory to make that necessary. He has a journal, actually. He's right now writing it down. He wrote this stuff down already in his journal. Do you think if I write down some ordinary acquaintance I meet in the park playing tennis or something, would that be an entry in my journal? Or what about that funny woman with that copying my movements? I could not but notice some of the peculiarities of my visitors. Girls and boys and young women generally seemed glad to be in the woods. They looked. What's the biggest park in North America? What's the biggest national park? Adirondacks. That's why we go to the Adirondacks. Because it's the biggest park. Do we?
Once with my girlfriend, we drove there.
We once drove there.
And all I had was a cafe. We went to drink coffee and talk. I don't have anything with park.
Most people, when they go to the park, they actually just go to the coffee shop. Remember how we go to New Paltz, but we really just go and have a cup of coffee at New Paltz. We go to the town of New Paltz, and we're not in the mountains at all, except for in our imagination. Why don't you actually connect?
The driving was impressive.
Some people, they think that they're going to the park is to drive through the park with a car. That's why I reject that thing. And I used to have mandatory hiking. In our traveling, we used to have a rule where you looked for, you took an hour or two hike. You had to find a yoga spot and do yoga somewhere. Then you had to find like a bookstore and stop at the bookstore. Then you had to find a coffee, of course, and then what was the other thing? A hot spring. So you stop at a hot spring, you do yoga, and you take a hike.
Hot spring, can you go and take a shower? Can you swim?
Take a swim, and I used to And if there's a body of water, you had to jump into it. You can't just look at it. It's not there. You're not there. If I saw Lake Superior and I say, look, we're looking at Lake Superior, I can't claim that I saw Lake Superior unless I jump into it. And so I had to, at 40 degrees, I had to jump in, or I wouldn't have been there. The same with the Pacific Ocean. It was cold a little bit up in near Seattle. So you have to jump into it, despite the temperature. So we have hot springs, yoga, coffee shop, taking a hike. What is the other things? Anyway, so I could not but notice some of the peculiarities of my visitors. Boys and girls and young women generally seemed glad to be in the woods. They looked in the pond and at the flowers, and improved their time, men of business, even farmers, thought only of solitude and employment. Some, like farmers, all they think about is working. They should be working. They shouldn't be taking. You can't really afford to take a day off, really. The farmers, they got the crops during planting and harvest. I wouldn't think you have time.
They should make the farms pleasant.
That's the only thing nice about farming is you got winter and maybe summer.
Around the farm, they should give space for beautiful flowers and make it into a prairie.
Some of them do.
And trees, so it is pleasant to be out there. But what they have there is just like a sea of green, whatever, at the same time.
The huge mega farmer should have a mini farm.
Because if they have different vegetation, they could have different greens also, huge of greens that would make it beautiful. You should have all the colors out when you're out in the farm. You should be able to enjoy, different colors, like natural landscape, and not just one green. After a while, you're tired of it.
You'd have to bring Thoreau over there, though, with his book. And of the great distance at which I dwelt from something or another, and though they said that they loved to ramble in the woods occasionally, it was obvious that they did not want to ramble in the woods. Restless, committed men, whose time was all taken up in getting a living or keeping it. Ministers who spoke of God as if they enjoyed a monopoly of the subject. Who could not bear all kinds of opinions, doctors, lawyers, uneasy housekeepers who pried into my cupboard and a bed when I was out. How came Mrs. to know that my sheets were not as clean as hers? Young men who had ceased to be young and had concluded that it was the safest to follow the beaten track of the professionals, all these generally said that it was not possible to do so much good in my position. Ah, there was the rub. The old and infirm, and the timid, and whatever age or sex, thought most of sickness and sudden accident and death, and to them life seemed full of danger. Though what danger is there if you don't think of any? And they thought that a prudent man would carefully select the safest position, where Dr. B might be on hand at a moment's warning. To them, the village was literally a community. A league of mutual defense, and you would suppose that they would not go a huckleberrying without a medicine chest. The amount of it, if a man is alive, there is always danger that he may die, though the danger might be allowed to be less in proportion as he is dead and alive to begin with. If you're dead in the beginning, if you're spiritually dead, aren't you almost dead anyways? A man sits at many risks as he runs. Finally there were the self-styled reformers, the greatest bores of all, who thought that I was forever singing. Quote, "This is the house that I built. This is the house that lives in the house that I built." But they did not know that the third line was, "These are the folks that worry the man that lives in the house that I built." That's kind of cute. I like that section. A man sits as many risks as he runs. Finally, there were the scythe-styled reformers, the greatest bores of all, who thought that I was forever singing, quote, "This is the house that I built. This is the house that lives in the house that I built." But they did not know that the third line was, "These are the folks that worry the man that lives in the house that I built." I did not fear the hen harriers, for I kept no chickens, but I feared the man harriers rather. I had more cheering visitors than the last. Children came a-berrying, railroad men taking a Sunday morning walk in clean shirts, fishermen, hunters, poets, and philosophers, in short, all honest pilgrims, who came out to the woods for freedom's sake and really left the village behind. I was ready to greet with, "Welcome, Englishmen, welcome, Englishmen," for I had communication with that race. Very good. Interesting. That's famous, I guess.
You got communication with what?
That's the end of Visitors in Walden.
Has communication with what?
The next section is the bean field. What?
Communication with what?
I had communication with that race of Englishmen. We're talking Midland Englishmen. I'm speaking in Midland English about Englishmen. But he is more New England. But I'm a descendant of the New England, so I descend from New Englanders, which makes me
Cousin of Thoreau.
who moved into the firelands, moved to Ohio, which then became Midlanders. So my speech is in Midland English as a descendant from New England. I don't represent English very well, actually. Because I moved to New York, I adopted Yiddish, and only still admire the British.